Welcome into the Behind the Wall pregame show. This is your host, Landon Tangwall. We are coming to you live from Campus Stakes downtown State College on Pew Street. We are previewing the Penn State UCLA game tomorrow at noon. And that is a big topic coming into this game that UCLA has to come from the West Coast, and they are obviously used to being a Pac 12 team playing on the West Coast. Well, now this is the first Pac 12 or new Pac 12 team that joined the Big Ten that has a noon kickoff on the East Coast. So now you have to turn around if you're UCLA and come over to the East Coast. And they decided that they wanted to leave this morning. So as we speak, UCLA is still in the air. The entire team is still making their way over to State College. It's interesting because Coach Franklin was asked last week. Penn State does make the trip to USC next week, and Coach Franklin already told everybody, hey, we will be leaving on Thursday to give the guys a little bit of time to get adjusted to the West Coast time zone. But it seems that UCLA did not go with that method, and they decided to get here. Their plane is supposed to land at 4 p.m. in State College. So, I mean, they're not getting settled till 5 p.m. I don't know how I really feel about that plan for them. I don't think that's going to work out too well. They're still going to be picking the crusties out of their eyes come kickoff tomorrow morning because you think about it, you just get here at 5 p.m. the night before. You wake up the next morning when you have to wake up at, say, 6 a.m., they probably have to wake up 6:30. It's still 3:30 to their body, 3:30 a.m. So they are going to be playing a game when the game kicks off. Their body, it's going to feel like it's 9 a.m. when it kicks off at noon. So I definitely think that's something to keep an eye on, and I would not be surprised at all if UCLA has a little bit of a slow start coming into this game. Now, I got a really cool opportunity this morning. I was on Fox Philly News, and we were at the Nittany Lion Inn, the new Nittany Lion Inn, and I got to do a lot of stuff with Freddie Mitchell, who was a longtime UCLA football player, was an All-American there in the late 90s, and then played for the Eagles for about 5 seasons, and he was in that Super Bowl that the Eagles unfortunately lost to the Patriots. But it was cool to talk to him, get some other perspective about UCLA, and I will tell you, even the alumni are not very confident in UCLA's abilities against Penn State tomorrow. Now, one of the big topics right now circling around Penn State, Twitter, all that good stuff. And real quick, if you guys are listening, you can also listen on YouTube at Behind the Wall with Landon Tangwall. And you can leave your comments in the questions. We're doing Q&A this whole hour, and we are here at Campus Stakes Live. But let's talk about Nick Singleton for a minute. And Nick Singleton was not seen at practice on Wednesday. And so there was a lot of questions coming into the week. Is Nick Singleton going to play? And then when Coach Franklin held his press conference, there was a lot of questions. And the main question that was asked from Mark Brennan was, is there going to be anything that will affect Nick Singleton's availability? Coach Franklin said, no, not at this time. Well, that quote was kind of misconstrued, and it was changed around, and then people were basically putting it out on social media as if they asked, is Nick Singleton going to play? And Franklin said, I don't have any info at this time. That was not really what was said. He said that he does believe there's nothing that is going to affect Nick Singleton playing against UCLA tomorrow. And I do think Nick Singleton will be on the field. Might have gotten a little banged up against Illinois last week after laying that hit on that Illinois defensive end. But overall, good to hear. I think we will have both running backs. And then something else to talk about, too, is because of the injury to Cam Wallace, who was the third running back, now enter in Quentin Martin as that third guy. And he's a true freshman. He is someone that has been here for a little bit. He got here. He early enrolled in January. And you did see him score 2 touchdowns this past spring game. So a lot of the fans are excited about him. He has played in the slot wide receiver position. He has also played a lot of running back. So I think also what that provides is the third running back. And, Nick and Katron last week against Illinois, they got 34 carries combined. There's not a lot of room for another running back. But what you can do with Quentin Martin is, as I mentioned, he played slot wide receiver. Andy Kotelnicki can get creative with Quentin Martin, kind of have some fun with that and move him around. He loves the jet motions, all that type of stuff, just getting creative with the offense. So Quentin Martin definitely provides an opportunity to spark this Penn State offense even more against a UCLA defense that really hasn't been super impressive up to this point. They have given up in 3 straight weeks almost 300 yards to every passer they've went against. And it has just been quarterback galore all over UCLA's defense, just slinging it. 3 touchdowns through the air last week, 4 the week before that. Indiana routed UCLA in the beginning of the season. So I am not too worried, just giving my overall synopsis of UCLA, of people saying, hey, this might be a trap game. I mean, just kind of adding everything up to where they are coming in from the West Coast. They're coming in really late. They are not going to be adjusted. It just kind of has a feel like they almost coming into it feel like they may lose this game, and they're kind of accepting it. Not to say they're not going to show up and give a little bit of a fight. But look, I mean, this is a team that just really hasn't done much at all this year. Their only win was against University of Hawaii, which they were down 10-0 at halftime against University of Hawaii. So it's not a team that is super overall too impressive. And kind of just going through the rest of their schedule, they finally eked out that win 16-13 against Hawaii. And then UCLA, they were tied 17-17 deep in the third quarter against LSU. And then it was at LSU. They did a really good job hanging in that game, but then you started to see LSU's talent just start to take over. And I think that's what you will kind of see tomorrow. I think UCLA has the opportunity to stay in it for a little bit. They have good players, but I just think at a certain point, Penn State is going to prevail over USC just from their scheme, from how good their players are. We saw Tom Allen really put on a show last week against an Illinois offense that I thought was pretty good. So now he is playing an even less talented offense in UCLA. Let's see what he can cook up. Let's see how creative he can get in disrupting UCLA's quarterback. And that's honestly another topic is UCLA's quarterback Garbers was injured coming into this game, and he is listed as questionable for tomorrow's game. We still do not know if they're going to have their starting quarterback. And there's a good reason that he's probably not going to play tomorrow, is because he was getting beat up in every game prior. He was getting sacked. He was getting driven into the ground like it was a WWE slam fest. And he got sacked 9 times in the last 2 games, 5 sacks last game, 4 sacks the game before that. So he is clearly not being protected by his offensive line, which also presents a kind of unique opportunity for a Penn State defensive line that really had their way with Illinois last week. And that's a good team up front on both sides, Illinois is. And UCLA, a much lesser opponent. I'm going to read some comments from the YouTube here. David Bortner says, how do you feel about JF not giving any details beyond long-term injuries? Saki was asked about KJ's injury by the media because the coaches won't address it. Could this lead to player distractions? Yes, I think there's a couple things when it comes to player injuries. I think the first thing that we can just make this easier is you have injury reports. They are now a thing in the SEC. If you go and look, every single week, every SEC team is required to release it just like NFL teams are. And I think it's important because there's a lot of money floating around college football, not just NFL anymore. We're talking from betting to, all these different things, NIL. So when you start to withhold information like that, it can get a little dangerous. So, I know that was Coach Franklin's, that was kind of his mantra up to this point, is give as little information to the media as I possibly can. But, when you start to do that, there's a couple things. Think of it from the player's perspective. So now, let's say we don't know really what KJ's injury is, how hurt he is. And you don't really you have to be kind of in secret when you are, injured, but Franklin and the other people, they're not giving any detail as to how healthy you are. Are you going to play again? So let's say you're walking around State College after class and people are probably stopping you. Hey, are you okay? Are you injured? How are you doing? No one said anything. So now it's kind of this like secretive thing. And as a player, you're walking around. It's like, oh yeah, I can't say anything. So that is where, from the player perspective, I think Coach Franklin presents it as, hey, we're protecting the guys and allowing them some time. But personally for me, I would rather just people know if I'm going to be injured, I'm going to be out. Now, it's one thing if you're playing Ohio State and let's say Katron Allen's injured and you kind of want to sneak that in their last second. You don't want them to know and get to prepare for that. I get that. But this is obviously an overall trend pretty much of not giving clear insight on players' injuries. And like I said, I don't have a problem with that. I like the idea of protecting the players, but I just think it gets to a point for the player when he is 2-3 months removed from his injury and he still basically has to be in hiding. That starts to get kind of difficult for the player. before I get to the second part, you were asking about Zaki, and because Zaki Wheatley was asked about KJ Winston's injury. Guys, please comment in the comment section here on YouTube at Behind the Wall with Landon Tangwall. I like for these Friday events to be full-on Q&A, so please leave any questions you guys have. No question is too dumb. But now let's talk about Zaki, because Zaki at Wednesday's practice was asked about KJ Winston's injury, and he was kind of coaxed into leading into it. And Zaki's dad has been on Twitter and has been kind of adamant about the fact he feels like that was really wrong of the reporter to go after Zaki, because Franklin already left it at that. He said, "Hey, you're not getting any answers on KJ," and then they went over and started asking the players if they had any information. Well, there's a couple things to argue there. Hey, you're a player. You know, they're going to ask you questions. You better be ready. And Zaki obviously let on a little bit. He basically referred to the fact that KJ's not really all the way around the team right now, that type of thing. He's taking care of business on his own, that stuff. So you know, obviously gave a little bit of information out there, and I think most people can infer long-term injury, that type of thing. Obviously, don't know exactly what it is, but you know, it does start to get hard when you're messing with the privacy of a player. But also, there's people that have a lot of money invested, have a lot of things involved with this team. So it's hard to say, hey, we can't talk about that at all. And it's like, wait a minute, we need to know. And honestly, I would say it starts to create a little bit more of a distraction for the team. I mean, this Nick Singleton thing, it's like, okay, that's it. It just blew up Wednesday. It was like, it really is nothing. And if Nick Singleton is going to play, which I think he is, it was a non-factor. But now we just had this big blow up Wednesday, Thursday, people freaking out. I'm getting text, what happened to Nick? What happened to Nick? And it's like, dude, everybody needs to calm down a little bit. But when you kind of do this, you know, behind the scenes, hey, we don't know. I don't have any answers for you on his availability. It's like, okay, well, that starts to kind of get a little old, a little annoying. So I see both sides of the spectrum. And like I said, from a player perspective, at least me, I would like my news not right away. And I like that Franklin does that. He gives the player time. He wants to have conversations with them. And he talked about that. That is why the reason he does not address the media right away after an injury, because he wants some time to talk to the player, discuss how they are going to release that information to the media and, you know, basically get it out there. So he wants the player some time to kind of mentally prepare, text, call anybody he needs to before other people find out from that player. So that's kind of a breakdown of how the long-term injuries work with Coach Franklin. And so someone else, why the slow starts on O this season? I feel like that has been a Penn State staple for a long time now. Even you think back to 2016 when we went on the Big Ten run, and it was a couple games. I mean, we started off really, really slow. And I don't think that's necessarily a credit to, a bunch of different offensive coordinators, but it feels like that's kind of been the same thing over and over for Penn State. Now, there's not one thing to attribute that to. And you can't necessarily say that people are unprepared or that type of thing. Just sometimes offenses come out, right? And they have a set of plays. And that's the only time the offense has a set of plays that are scripted. So an offensive coordinator, the quarterback, and the head coach, they'll sit down before the game and say, hey, we are going to have these 10 to 15 plays that we really, really like and we want to get to in the beginning of the game and test kind of how the defense reacts to it. Now, you saw that from Illinois. They marched right down the field. Well, those were their scripted plays, and then Tom Allen kind of responded and adjusted, and you saw what happened the rest of the game. Illinois really did not move the ball much at all after that first drive. So I think that, maybe we're not scripting plays well enough. I don't know exactly the reason. I think there's things that kind of all accumulate together for the reason for the slow starts. But I will say, going out to USC next week, you can't start slow. Ohio State in a couple weeks, you cannot start slow. One other thing you can't do is you can't miss field goals. And that's something that people have been talking about all week. Obviously, Sanders Sahedek missed 2 field goals last week. And it's one of those things where, they haven't been super important up to this point. We've been okay missing some field goals. And it's, hey, we're up. We got a comfy lead. Well, that is going to stop soon. When we play, like I said, USC, Ohio State, we cannot leave those points on the field. And we can't be at the 30-yard line, the opposing team's 30-yard line, and have to go for it on a 4th and 7 when we really just want to come away with 3 points because we don't have the confidence in our kicker. And talking about the situation itself, Coach Franklin has expressed a lot of confidence in Sanders Sahedek and has said, hey, I've seen him kick really, really well at practice. We just, obviously has struggled in games. So for Sander, he needs to kind of continue to move it along and make some kicks. It sounds like he's still going to get an opportunity against UCLA this weekend. If you did notice that last extra point they kicked after our last touchdown, it was not Sander Sahedek that was in. It was Ryan Barker. It was probably very unnoticeable because they are both left-footed kickers. One is 94, the other one's 93 as far as their jersey numbers. So I don't think most people noticed, and especially at that point in the game, cursing the kicker's name probably for a lot of fans. So they were just mad. But Ryan Barker is a walk-on kicker. He's someone that has been here for a couple years now. And so it kind of seems like that is where the competition is between him and Sander Sahedek. But at the end of the day, it doesn't seem like we're going to have a super consistent kicking game here at Penn State, which I'm just going to shoot you guys straight. Like, I'm always honest. You guys know that. That's a little bit worrisome headed into some deep Big Ten play where we're going to need those points against Ohio State. The field starts to shrink a little bit when you get on their side of the field. Defenses get better, and when you need to come away with 3 points, 3 points here, 3 points there against Ohio State, you better make those field goals. So I think that was a big thing when Coach Franklin left the offense out there on fourth and, I think it was 4th and 5, 4th and 6, and we did not convert from their, we were on their 30-yard line, and we give them the ball back instead of being able to kick a field goal. And I think it was definitely a situation where Coach Franklin would love to kick a field goal, but he just didn't have the trust in his kicker. So something to keep an eye on. Let's see if Sander Sahedek gets a couple more chances. Strategy. I'm going to read a couple more questions. If PSU is significantly up at half, how long do you keep your starters in? Do you think they need more reps in prep for USC? I think this is something, and Coach Franklin's going to be cautious, I feel like, because up to this point, there's been a lot of injuries, guys. I mean, KJ Winston out for long term. Dom DeLuca, it does seem like he is going to be back this week. I do want to update you guys. Dom DeLuca, Sal Wormley are both back. Sal was poked in the eye on the 4th or 5th play of the game, did not return. Penn State actually had 3 players poked in the eye against Illinois: Kobe King, Sal Wormley, and JB Nelson. There is no word from Coach Franklin on JB Nelson, just that Sal Wormley was back and Kobe was fine. He played the rest of the game. So we will see Dom DeLuca, and it was saw on Twitter, he's in a cast. So Dom has a cast around his right hand. So you're going to see a gritty Dom DeLuca. Now, he might not be able to get a pick six as easily as he has in the past, or tackle as easily, but he is going to be out there back at Sam linebacker. So that'll be good. And I do think that we saw some promising stuff from Zachary Nelson, who came down from safety, was playing safety. Now he was kind of playing linebacker because of the depth issue. And he looked pretty good for a young guy in a new position. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on too. And real quick, when we're talking about the 3 guys got poked in the eye against Illinois, coming out of halftime, Coach Franklin got interviewed. And normally I'm against the halftime interviews. You don't get much out of them. The coaches just say, hey, we need to score more points, and they move on. But this was the one example of every once in a blue moon, you get a really good response from a coach. And Coach Franklin came over, got interviewed by Brian Tripp, and he said that, we need to clean up the penalties, and I'm not talking about the BS ones. And he did not say BS. He said the full word. So I'm sure he got a little bit of fineage for that. Probably got a letter sent to his house from the NCAA. He might have to pay up, but that's all right. He makes a lot of money, so it was probably worth it for him. But the refs were pretty bad in that Illinois game. But I thought it was pretty comical to see Coach Franklin turn up on the refs a little bit. I can't criticize the team's performance when the fans can't do a proper wave. Oh, has that been a problem? I don't know. Have we had a problem with doing the wave in the Beaver Stadium? I guess we'll see. This is a good question. Who will emerge as wideout number 2? And I think this is something that has been, honestly, who's going to emerge as wideout number 1? That's the real question. Because right now, after West Virginia, it felt like, hey, Trey Wallace is going to be the guy. 136 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's going up and catching jump balls for Drew. So it was like, oh, believing that, hey, we got our number 1 guy. Well, the past 2 weeks, Trey Wallace hasn't really been too much of the vocal point of the offense. Now, last week it was the run game's turn. Nick and Katron really got going. But, I'm cautious to say it's okay for a team to have wide receiver by committee. And what I mean by that is it's a new guy every week that has a good game. And one of the reasons why, because we are trying to win a national championship. That is the expectation here at Penn State every year. And in my opinion, there really hasn't been a team in recent memory at all, that didn't have a number one wide receiver. Even thinking about Michigan, Roman Wilson was a playmaker and was a pretty good number one and got drafted by the Steelers pretty high because of that. But right now, we have seen promise from a lot of guys. We have seen Amari Evans. Amari Evans gets a deep shot at least once a week from Drew Aller and sometimes 2 times a game. So I have loved seeing the difference in Drew Aller's demeanor of wanting to stretch the field and give the wide receivers some opportunity. But I think this is a game where we see Trey Wallace get back involved. I do want to see that, but I'm just a little bit worried about the fact, like I said, we don't have any definite guys. And we got Tyler Warren, who's the best tight end in college football, but you need to have a couple guys out at wide receiver that can stretch a defense, which, like I said, we saw from Amari Evans up to this point, but you need that guy that Drew can trust on a 50-50 ball. And I think Trey Wallace can be that guy. So we're starting to kind of put it together, but we need to have a real number one heading into deep Big Ten play and then even the playoffs. And then, like you said, some guys emerge behind them. I want to see Julian Fleming continue to get more involved. Liam Clifford has been someone that the coaches were raving about coming out of camp. And have seen him get a little bit involved. He had his first career touchdown against Kent State a couple weeks ago. Shout out the wide receivers and the tight ends doing some really cool celebrations, smashing a beer can over their head and pretending to chug it. That's my type of celebration, in my opinion. I'm excited to continue to see. And Amari Evans always has a nice dance to break out. So, I say that as a joke, but I will say I do think that actually means something. Because if you think back, I'll tell you, as an offense, 2020, 2021, 2022, we didn't really have any dances, nothing like that. And as much as some fans might not be a fan of the dancing in the end zone, all that stuff, it means something from a standpoint of you're having fun. And Nick Singleton even said that. He said, hey, we're having fun as an offense. Guys are inspired. And that's a credit to Andy Kotelnicki. And you start to see that kind of cultivate within the team and really more the offense, because the defense has had that swagger, especially with Manny Diaz celebrating, doing all, rah-rah, all that stuff. But you never really felt it from the offense. When you stepped away from the offense, or when you stepped away for a minute, you kind of look at the whole big picture. It was like, oh, the defense, I mean, they're bringing the energy. But you'd walk away from a game and you had the offense, we'd win. And it was like, okay, that was good enough. But it wasn't, winning a college football playoff game good enough. And that's kind of how the offense felt for a little while. And now fast forward, I think we are in a completely different place with this offense. But we start to get a couple wide receivers to really emerge. Then I think we can truly talk about a shot at the national championship. But if we can't get that to happen, I think that's difficult, because you saw last week against Illinois, that was a really, really good defensive secondary for Illinois. Drew Aller didn't pass for over 150 yards. And so it was cool to be able to rely on the ground game. Don't get me wrong. Being able to sit back and say, hey, we can pound the ball on these guys all day long and just sit back and let our offensive line do work. I love seeing it. You guys know I'm an offensive lineman, so I am going to enjoy seeing that. But we need to be able to throw the ball against good teams. And when we see Ohio State, they have a very good secondary. So we have to be definitely ready for that. Thoughts on Franklin's decision to punt on 4th and 1 in the second quarter when our O-line was already dominating? Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you're on your own side of the field and it's 4th and 1, especially earlier in the game, you are a little bit hesitant, because I will tell you guys, Coach Franklin has made this point many, many times that it is a field position battle. So if you want the answer to why he did it, it is because he was fighting for field position. And he shows, there's sketches that show you by each yard marker, hey, when you start on your own 20-yard line, you have whatever, a 15% chance to score a touchdown. But when you start on your opponent's 45, I mean, it skyrockets up to whatever, 50% chance to score a touchdown. So when you start to, calculate those risks, and Franklin decided to punt it, and he wanted to play the field position battle. Now, you know what I'm saying, 4th and 1, offensive line's dominating. You run that ball, give it to Katron Allen, and he just puts his head down behind the offensive line that was moving guys. I'm a fan of that. And I think we are going to continue to see more reliance on the ground game. I don't really think it matters too much this weekend against UCLA. And I think it's actually an opportunity for Drew Aller to light up the scoreboard. If you follow me on Twitter at Landon Tangwall, I do a bold prediction every single Saturday morning. So I will put that out tomorrow morning. But if you're watching it live, I will give you a little bit of a sneak peek. It's going to be a Drew Aller bold prediction. I think he is going to have a big day. So I'm excited to see what he is going to bring and what Andy Kotelnicki is going to bring. Any word on offensive breakout for this game, defensive breakout? Okay, we'll give 2 players. I like that. So I think the offensive breakout, I think Trey Wallace is going to come back out again. I think we'll hit him on a couple deep posts, that type of thing, and try to stretch the field, give him a one-on-one opportunity against a UCLA secondary that has allowed up the past 3 games, 270 yards, 3 touchdowns, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, 350 yards, 4 touchdowns. I mean, quarterbacks are just routing the UCLA defense. They're having a good time with them. So Penn State's watches film too. They notice that. So I think they want to attack that. And a week after your passing game didn't really get going too well, you say, okay, we know we can run the ball. We just proved that against the Illinois defensive front that was really, really stout. And said, okay, so now I think we come into this week and say, all right, let's see how much we really can pass it. I think Drew Aller, I'll just give you guys the bold prediction. Drew Aller has passed for 325 yards. That's the most yards he's ever passed for in his career. That was West Virginia last year, week 1. I think he's going to go over 325 tomorrow. That is my bold prediction. He's just there's too much opportunity there, and I think Kotelnicki sees that, and he's excited to take advantage of a defense that is really just lacking overall. How do you think PSU secondary fares against a UCLA passing attack? Well, I think it does matter on a couple things. A Penn State secondary was really good last week, especially take away that first drive. They were pretty stellar. They really did not let Luke Altmaier get going, and he was kind of starting to get into a groove. And we mentioned before the game, he was the only quarterback in all of college football with 10 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. That changed after that game. He had 2 turnovers. And had a pretty rough day. Now, I think one of the biggest factor here is Garbers, the UCLA starting quarterback. Is he going to play? Because he is questionable coming into this game. I mean, because he was just taking a beating early in the season. Like when they played LSU, they had 5 sacks on him. And it just didn't look fun out there. And it wasn't like he was just getting sacked, just getting kind of tackled. Like, no, there's a couple of plays where it was like, oh my God, did he just get decapitated right now? Like, is he okay? So that is why you're hurting at quarterback. He is really, really injured. So I'm curious to see. And it is a product that, like I said, his offensive line has allowed 9 sacks in the last 2 games. And I wouldn't want to be the quarterback sitting back there. So we're going to see, and especially you played LSU, you play Oregon. They got some good pass rushers. But now you have Abdul Carter, Denai Dennis Sutton, Zane Durant on the inside, who has been really, really disruptive. I'm not feeling good. Whoever's playing quarterback for UCLA, I don't think you have a very long time to pass. Let's just put it that way. Can you explain why they put Vanga Ioane in motion? What advantage does that create? So the question here is about Andy Kotelnicki has put a offensive lineman in the slot wide receiver position in 3 out of the 4 games. And so, there's a couple things that it does. And if the defense recognizes it, if you really know what's going on, like when I saw it, I knew exactly what was happening. Vanga was going to get motioned over and blocked down on a defensive end. But they tried to do it where they ran outside zone, and essentially they brought Vanga in motion from the right to the left and kept him going and basically made him a puller, but without having to pull. So if you think about it, you have an offensive lineman in motion and you run outside zone and try to get outside. Well, now, instead of having a 170-pound wide receiver blocking, you have a 350-pound Vanga Ioane blocking on the edge. So that is where you start to create a little bit of mismatches. And that is where Andy Kotelnicki is really good at. His main thing is, how can I create a mismatch with this defense? So obviously you can't do it too often. They do it once a game. But, it's a pretty heavy tell that it's a run. But you just don't know really where they're going with the run, because a power gap scheme up the middle versus an outside zone run on all the way to the numbers to the sideline, those are 2 very different plays. But that is kind of the answer to why Vanga Ioane gets put out in the slot, and Anthony Donka did the same thing too. It's really just to mess with the defense a little bit, get them offset, get them a little bit confused. Someone else, Sink Wolves, asked in the comment section, do you think an early noon start for a West Coast team is a factor? I think it's a huge factor because, I mean, you think about it. You get here, they're getting in, let's see, it's 3:30. Their flight is supposed to land at 4 p.m. So they're landing and they're coming across the country. I doubt they're landing at State College Airport. They might be, but normally when you fly cross country, you're not able to land at State College Airport. Normally you have to go to Harrisburg. But either way, you're getting in at 5 p.m. if you're UCLA and you go to sleep tonight. And it's like, okay, I have to wake up and for a noon kick, I'd say teams generally wake up about 6:30 is wake up call because you have to go eat breakfast about 7, get ready. You have to get to the stadium about 9:30. So I think, it's kind of messed up to make an East Coast or West Coast team go play a noon kick on either side. But you add in the fact that UCLA decides, hey, no, we're going to come in basically as late as possible because now you wake up and you're UCLA and you wake up, it's 6 a.m., but it's really 3 a.m. to your body and you got to get up and go. So you're going to be tired at kickoff when it is 12. You are going to feel like it's 9 a.m. I don't think anybody's ever played a football game at 9 a.m. It's not a good feeling. It's not something I would want to do at all. So I think it's a huge factor. And I think kind of how this game plays out the rest of the way. Let's say UCLA comes out really, really sluggish and it's just an awful game and we just take care of business, no questions asked. I think there is kind of a little bit of talks within the Big Ten, within the ACC. They got Cal, University of Cal is traveling all over the East and West Coast. It's like, hey, I don't think we can give these teams a noon kick. But, I mean, when Fox wants the noon kick, they get the noon kick. That's kind of how it works. The money is the factor. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on. But I would bet good money that UCLA comes out and starts really, really slow. Real quick, before we get back into Penn State UCLA, I want to talk about this one topic real quick. Dave Portnoy, who is the head of Barstool, he runs Barstool. He came out and he's a huge Michigan fan, and he said, hey, Sharon Moore, he told the head coach of Michigan, I have a blank check, and you need to go out and get us the best quarterback possible in the recruiting class, and I will give him however much money he wants. It's an interesting thing going on there. And, number one, then it was confirmed that Sharon Moore and Dave Portnoy had some conversation about it and we're talking about it. So I think that's an interesting topic is now, NIL was businesses, that type of thing, and was meant to just be able to give the players an outlet to make a little bit of money, create their brand. I mean, that was initially what it was about, is to be able to brand and market yourself. Well, now we got big time super fans. And we saw the same thing from Oregon and the Nike CEO. He came and said, hey, you have a blank check. You can do whatever you want, right? However many dollars you need. I want to see a national championship for my team. Because, I mean, you think about it. Think about the average person. They would do anything. People say, hey, I'd cut off my for my team to win a national championship. So you're sitting there and let's say you're worth whatever, $500 million, whatever it is. You're not going to throw out a couple million to make your team great that you cheer for every Saturday. Because just because those guys are that rich, they get just into it just as much as we do, just as much as we care. Just because they're rich doesn't mean they don't have, care towards their team. So I think we're going to see more and more big time business guys step in and say, hey, I want to help this team out. I'm going to give you some real money. Hopefully Penn State has someone like that. I don't know if Keegan Michael Peel, those guys want to get involved at all. Hopefully they will throw us a little bit of money. 10% tax on tickets. We have to do it to stay competitive. Jay, I can't tell if that's a joke or not, man. You throw some good questions in here, but I don't know if I'm feeling your sarcasm or not. Because I believe, I forget which school it is. We'll say it's Tennessee, but there's a school in the SEC right now that has now started putting a 10% tax on any tickets that you buy. And they said, hey, it's going towards NIL. Some fans are with it. Some fans are really against it. I think if you did something like that at Penn State, the fans would actually keel over and die. Half the fan base would have a coronary if they put a 10% tax on tickets. So I don't. So should we? I think you would. Some fans would. I mean, the fans that support NIL, but you have to understand the fan base we're working with, guys. PA, we're traditionalists, Penn Staters. They don't like a lot of change. And you start making them pay more money. I mean, we got to think about it. Penn State is a blue collar town. That is what we have. As much as it is higher ed, That is the main people that graduate from Penn State. So you start asking them, not even asking them, telling them, because you're telling them if you put a 10% tax on tickets, you're paying that or you're not coming in the game. And it's like, okay, where do we go from that? And I just don't think you need to piss off the fans anymore, because the fans really at Penn State, I'd say the majority, it is a minority that supports NIL. The majority of Penn State fans either are not educated enough on NIL, and that is, due to a couple of facts. But I think the majority of fans just would not like that. We don't have the major donors like Oregon. It's the only way we can stay competitive. What's the alternative? The alternative is basically salary caps. That's where we need to go. Like, we need all this to end. And when Penn State will be one of the biggest benefactors from if we go the salary cap route. Excuse me 1 second, guys. Could you guys grab me a water out of there? Thank you so much. Throat's getting a little dry, guys. We've, talking a lot today. It was oh man, I already talked about where I was. We were on Fox Philly this morning. I was on there with a couple people. Freddie Mitchell, if you're an Eagles fan, thank you so much. If you're an Eagles fan, Freddie Mitchell played for you guys for about 4 years, but he was a star out at UCLA. So I got to do some cool stuff with him this morning on Fox Philly. But yeah, talking about the major donors, like you said, we don't have a major donor like Oregon, Ohio State, that type of thing. And, it's a problem, but I think it's also on the university. It is on the athletic department, that type of thing. You have to build those relationships with those mega donors. It doesn't just fall into your lap. Just because some rich person owns a business and they went to Penn State doesn't mean that they are automatically going to give money back to the school. That is not how it works. You need to, go fly out, go see them, build a relationship. That is where it seems Penn State is struggling. Like you said, we don't have the big donors. It's not like we don't have rich Penn Staters. It is the biggest alumni network in all of college, any college, anywhere, any university. So there has to be another answer. And I think it's just we're not doing great with our donor relations. And there's a couple things with that. I mean, like I said, the main thing is we are Penn State. We are traditionalists, and we do not. Majority of fans don't like NIL. But the other piece of that is you have to show it. Like, I think we've all seen that Penn State is obviously behind with NIL, and just getting it out there to the fans, really. And I think the biggest thing is understanding. I'm curious, you guys tell me in the comments, how long did it take you to really understand NIL? And did you have to seek out that information, or was it told to you? Because I feel like a lot of people aren't getting it told to them. If they truly want to learn about NIL, they seek it out. Now, I think that's where the problem lies with Penn State, is we need to be seeking them out, giving them the information, and essentially asking them to help. If you don't ask them to help, ain't nobody coming out of the woodworks to just give $5 million. I guess Dave Portnoy is for Michigan, but that's not how a lot of Penn State alums work. So we're going to have to figure that out a little bit. I think more fans would contribute money to the NIL if there was a subscription-based system, like $10 to $20 a month. I mean, there is. And honestly, that's something that someone has suggested. Hey, if every single Penn State alumni that's alive gives $10, we'll have a ton of money. Sounds good. How do you get it done? How do you get everybody to buy into that? Because, at the end of the day, it feels like if you're a Penn State fan, let's just talk about this. We have a lot of people come to our games. We fill it up 107,000 pretty much every time. So you are now traveling to the middle of nowhere. It's hard. You can't just fly into Penn State. State College Airport does not get a lot of flights in. So you're either driving, you're flying into Pittsburgh, Philly, and then driving to State College. You then have to get a hotel room. You get price gouged out the wazoo in State College when you have to get a hotel room on a home weekend here. So you have that. You got to get food. You got to buy whatever jerseys. You're going to make a trip to the student bookstore. Shout out student bookstore, friend of the show. We will be there Sunday morning, 10 to 11 a.m. Me and Goon will be live. So join us on YouTube. And then the Nittany Lion mascot will be there too at 11 a.m. This Sunday. So be on the lookout for that. But, all those factors and all that money, and then you're asked to also dig in your pocket and say, hey, we need a little extra money for one of our wide receivers. Why don't you fork it over, fans? Well, that's hard. And guess what? I'm sitting there. I'm a blue collar guy. I don't make a lot of money. And then you're asking for this, essentially, a wide receiver diva who's 18 years old. And you go, hey, give him $100 out of your paycheck right now. Do that right now. Go ahead. And it's like, no. So I'm just playing devil's advocate here, but like that is how some of these Penn State fans feel when they are being asked for the money. Is like, dude, I support the team in so many ways, and now you want me to add on and do this too? I'm just kind of telling you guys where I think a lot of people are coming from right now of why they don't like NIL. And like I said, I think there is a lot better ways to incorporate people. I think we need to do a better job on social media, like Happy Valley United, that type of thing. What's the point of dumping $700 million into a stadium to be mediocre due to NIL? I have also heard that there's still rift between donors and how Joe Pa was treated. Jay, you know your stuff, man. Shout out Jay. He's always popping up. I love his questions. The whole $700 million thing, it's that's a lot of money, and Penn State's going to be in debt for a little while. You don't start making that back. Let's say it's not going to happen, but let's say the team does bad for a while, and it's like you don't get the sales tickets you were expecting. Everything kind of starts to go downhill. You can be in a bad place putting $700 million into something, and I think that's why you saw a lot of board members kind of be squeamish about going forward with it, because it's like there was a couple of them that didn't want to do it and didn't want to vote yes because they felt like, hey, this is going to put us in a bad place for a lot of years, and we're going to have to crawl our way out of it. So I think there's that piece of it, but I do like Beaver Stadium getting renovations, and I would be lying if I was saying I'm not excited for the fact of hockey games, potential NFL preseason games, all because we're starting to renovate Beaver Stadium. So that is exciting. Now, your point, and this is how I know you know what you're talking about, Jay. He said, is there still a rift between donors and how Joe Pa was treated? I mean, everything, stuff happens. That's kind of how it goes. So are Penn State fans, are there some that are never going to move on, and there will never be a head coach good enough because we had Joe Pa, who was the greatest head coach of all time? Yes. I mean, that is going to be how some fans feel until they die. No coach is good enough for Penn State except for Joe Paterno. But you kind of got to move on. And I think where there's a little bit of a rift is like, okay, we feel like he was wronged. We want you guys to do something, that type of thing. And it's like, what do you want us to do? We're not putting the statue back up. I don't think it's going to happen. That's not happening. They're not going to name the field Paterno Field. All of it just invites too much criticism. As much as you guys know how I feel, I love Joe Paterno. I love what Penn State stood for. I love what they continue to stand for and what we built Penn State into today. But I think you're inviting a lot of issues there. And when you say, hey, we can't really do anything, Don or Joe, right now, the donors say, oh, okay, well, I guess we're not opening up our wallets. So that's kind of what happens there as far as when donors, that's how they kind of feel. Sorry, a lot of questions. I appreciate you guys showing up, man. This is really fun. I have a good time. We don't even take commercial breaks on this show once you guys get asking questions, because I love it, man. You guys are the best. We are at Campus Stakes Live. We're here 3 to 4 every Friday of home games. And then me and Keith Goon Conlin will be live at the Student Bookstore 10 a.m. Sunday morning. I'll donate to NIL after Franklin donates $1 of his grossly overpaid big salary. Franklin does get paid a lot of money, but there is a rule against head coaches giving money to NIL. I will tell you that. Who was your favorite Penn State player growing up? Most people kind of find this shocking. I didn't watch college football at all, let alone Penn State football. I knew nothing about Penn State football, and that is actually kind of the whole reason. Obviously, if you're in here on live on YouTube, you follow me, that I do a ton of Paterno era content and covering the guys that I always say made Penn State what it is today. And I do that because I don't know anything about Penn State. And when I retired, I said, what the hell? Like, what is this? What is everything? And I've gotten to be so educated. And I basically went on a mission learning about Penn State football history. And I said, okay, let me document this and share this with everybody so they can either learn with me or they can relive those great moments that they once really enjoyed. So that's kind of but if I had to pick a player now, dude, Paul Posluszny, the way he played football, I really enjoyed, and I want to give him a shout out too, because he is being inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame this year, and Penn State will be honoring him this weekend. I think in between first and second quarter or at halftime. It's one or the other, but I'm kind of excited to see him be out there. He still looks like he can play football. I'll tell you what, Paul Posluszny is a special dude. Jay said, we had to retain the roar and didn't come close to meeting our goal. I highly doubt an additional 20 to 30 ticket raise, like $6 million per year, will go to NIL. Pros outweigh the cons. Yeah, I mean, look, anytime the whole retain the roar campaign, that's difficult because now you're calling on the fans and saying, hey, we need you to make our team essentially. And I think it's hard because every university around that has NIL, they of course are always asking for fan donations. But I think most places aren't relying, at least most places in big teams like Penn State, Ohio State. There's no other teams like us that are relying on the fans to get the money. They have the big donors, they have the big boosters. So when you start to ask a fan base that we talked about it for a while, is very blue collar. We don't, there's not a ton of rich people at Penn State. Of course there is some, but that's not kind of the demographic of Penn State and who comes here. So then you start asking those people for money, and some people are saying, hey, it's the fans' fault if we don't get NIL done. Well, we just talked about it. The fans are dumping so much money into the team supporting. So it's hard. How do I reconcile giving $100 out of my paycheck when I am budgeting everything, barely making ends meet, and now you want me to give another $100? It's hard to do if I'm a Penn State fan. So I think we need to, obviously, when we have revenue sharing come, that is going to change the game. That starts next year. There's a lot it is straight school to player, which I think is good, because we have seen a lot of stuff over the past couple days of players. The UNLV quarterback, that was a huge thing where he was promised money verbally, never got it. It's like, okay, what's going on here? We need to get that. We need to get that out a little bit. Let's see here. Yeah, there are more events at Pregame Stadium. The concerts in there, that's the thing. We need to do that, because if anybody knows, especially the weather in the summertime in Happy Valley, I don't know if there's a better place to hang out in the summertime. So I hope that we can definitely have some more concerts there. Hopefully we get that guy. What's that guy? Jelly? Who'd you go see in concert? Jelly Roll. Everybody loves Jelly Roll. He's like the up-and-coming country singer at the moment right now. And he's really positive, all that good stuff. So I love to see it. But we've had some really cool concerts here. Fun fact, I actually went. My first concert was Drake at the BJC this past year earlier. And then I got to see at Heinz Field. I will not call it Acrisure Stadium. At Heinz Field, I saw Kenny Chesney and Zach Brown Band. And that was my first real concert. I really enjoyed that one. That was fun. Let me know. I'm curious, what kind of concerts have you guys made your way to, especially if it maybe Beaver Stadium or the BJC? Hot take, but what Franklin has done at Penn State has been pretty incredible. I mean, he definitely is fighting against a lot of stuff. I mean, definitely, like you just said, he doesn't have the donor support that a lot of other places have. He doesn't have, a lot of stuff. Obviously came in, facilities were not up to par. That is one thing that if we want to critique Joe, he did not do a good job of, is making sure the facilities were up to date. It was kind of like, hey, we're Penn State. We're going to be fine. We're just going to do it. That doesn't really work anymore. Someone said we need some recent grads to strike it and make rich. Yeah, pretty much. We need some bigwigs to come through and throw some money, man. I mean, really, because here's the one thing that I will say about that is, like I said, we are getting into a world of college football revenue sharing where that's all taken out. Penn State football is going to get $15 million to disperse all over their players, and that's good. Now, the only caveat to that is, let's say the 2025 class. Penn State has like one or two guys inside the top 200. One or two. That's about it. Ohio State, and if you've listened and you've heard me say this before, Ohio State has 3 of the top 6 players in the entire nation committed to their class right now. They have like 8 or 9 players in the top 100 committed to them. Like I said, we have like 1 or 2 inside the top 200. So people say, hey, why isn't Franklin winning the big games? Why can't he beat Ohio State? Well, just go look at the recruiting rankings, because guess what? It is a direct reflection. I'd say, you look at a recruiting ranking from, let's say, 2019. I bet you go and look at 2022, and it looks very similar to where you ended up in that recruiting ranking to what your schedule and your win-loss percentage looked like that year. There is a direct correlation. You get better players, you win more games. And Coach Franklin is pretty consistently in the 7, 8, 9, 10 range as far as his recruiting ranking each year. We're like the 10th best team. Sometimes we'll sneak up into the top 5 every once in a blue moon. But for the most part, he is around 10. Guess where Coach Franklin finishes most years? around 10 overall in the rankings. So it is a direct correlation of recruiting to how you actually play. Coach Franklin will never be fully appreciated. Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I don't think, I'm going to be honest, I think really any coach that comes here is never going to be fully appreciated because of what Joe Paterno did. I mean, no one can have as much influence at a university, and his players talk about it to me all the time, that Joe meant so much more to this university than just being a football coach. And actually, if you've ever been to the Texas Roadhouse in State College, shout out Texas Roadhouse. I was there last night. I had about 3 orders of the buttered rolls and a nice steak. But they have it up on the wall, and it's basically a quote from Joe Paterno that just says, "I hope I'm remembered a lot more than just being a football coach." And that is what he meant to the university from an academic standpoint, that type of stuff. I mean, Joe isn't fully appreciated still. Well, yeah, it goes both ways. I mean, obviously, everything that happened now, there is the criticism of Joe, all that stuff, and it opens the door to that. And it's a very tricky subject, guys, to obviously talk about. And with me coming in late and only learning about this stuff, I'm sure a lot of you guys lived it. I did not. I only learned about it afterwards. So I can't even imagine what that was like to go through as a fan base and stick by them. So I think you guys deserve a lot of credit too for continuing to support this Penn State team that really is something special. Coach James Franklin will be fully appreciated after Joe is. Coaches get no love. Yeah, I mean, unless you consistently win a national championship, like a Nick Saban level, it's hard, man. I gotta say, but I will tell you, like, I didn't even know that Joe Paterno had like 4 or 5 undefeated seasons that they didn't get a national championship. He was robbed of a couple. 1994 to start. That is the biggest robbery I have ever seen. We got some cool stuff on the 1994 team coming out this January. Be on the lookout. Just know it's going to involve a lot of guys, a lot of interviews. I'm putting something really, really cool together for you guys this coming spring. So I'm excited for that one. But let's talk about UCLA just for these last couple minutes. So I know we had some good conversation here. Let's talk about UCLA these final 8 minutes. I guess the first thing is, like I said earlier, if you weren't listening, I think Nick Singleton will play, and that's not too much of a worry, nor do I really think we need him to play, but I think he will. So that'll be good. I think that UCLA has a awful pass rush. So what that equals, Drew Aller is going to have a lot of time in the pocket to throw those deep balls. So that's why I think that we are going to take deep shots to Trey Wallace. We're going to take another deep shot to Amari Evans, which we do every single game, because UCLA has 0 sacks in the past 3 games. They got 5 against the University of Hawaii week 1 and have had 0 since. So that is a real lack of pressure on the quarterbacks. And as I rattled you off their stats earlier, the past 3 games that UCLA has played, they gave up 278 passing yards, 352 passing yards, and then 307 passing yards. So not good in the passing defensive category for UCLA. So that's where I think there is a real opportunity for Drew and company to get going, because it is hard for defensive backs to hold up for 5-6 seconds if your defensive line is not getting home. So I was listening to a UCLA podcast, and they were saying that Penn State has no run game. Well, they don't watch football. Because not everybody needs a microphone, That's what they say about podcasters. Too many people are handing out mics. We need to make them just a little more expensive. I don't even know how you could imagine, Peter, for someone to say that, because those guys need to be canceled. We have rushed for over 200 yards in every single game this year, over 300 against Kent State. I digress. Don't get me started on our offensive line and our run game, because we are absolutely killing it where we are at right now. Drew has to play better than he did against Illinois. Some of those throws and decisions made me nervous. Not so much against UCLA, but USC and OSU. Yeah, I think that's a great point. And, if we're just being fair and call a spade, Drew Aller has not had a stellar game against, really an elite opponent up to this point. Now, I will say there was a couple throws, like you said, that did make me a little nervous watching Drew Aller against Illinois. But then also, he did a good job of managing the game. He knew it wasn't going to be a necessarily huge game for him, and so we relied on the ground game. So I do think that is something that I want to see. I want to see Drew Aller step up in moments when we need him and show out. The one good thing I will say from last week is that we established a ground game that could not be stopped. And I feel like there has not been a game for Penn State in a long time where we couldn't pass the ball, but all we did was run the ball. And what that is saying, hey, offensive line, running backs, we're not really able to pass it right now. We need you to maul them up front and get us 5, 6, 7, 8 yards of carry. That's just what Penn State did. And then they broke off a couple 20-yard runs, that type of thing. So, I mean, yeah, he did look a little out of sync against Illinois. But I will tell you, too, Illinois has played 5 games. They've only allowed a passer over 150 yards, just 150 yards passing. That's not that much. They've only let one guy do that, and they've played 5 quarterbacks. So, I mean, it's a good secondary for Illinois. So I'm not saying that Drew should not have lit them up. I think Ohio State has a better secondary than Illinois, obviously, but it's a good secondary. I will give them that. Justin McCarthy says, "Is Singleton playing tomorrow?" I think so. Yeah, I think Nick Singleton will be out there from everything the coaches have said. So I do see that. Run game is our strength. If it isn't broke, don't fix it. I don't disagree. I do just want to see Drew Aller sling it a little bit more. But the offensive line as a whole has been really, really good. And coming into this year, you lose Olu Fashion, you lose Caden Wallace, Hunter Norzat, 6th-year center. And then you say, okay, I'm a little bit worried. And it felt like going into West Virginia, nobody had talked about the offensive line that had 3 new starters. And then next thing you know, it's like, okay, they're doing a great job. We are running the ball at will. Drew Aller really hasn't been under a lot of pressure so far this year, and he has been able to deliver. And then you watch what they just did against Illinois, where I feel like that was their first big test, was Illinois saying, hey, this is a good defensive front. This is a good offensive front too. And how are we stack up to them? And we more than answered the bell on both sides. Our defensive line and offensive line were really, really dominant against Illinois. And like I said, I thought that was a test. They more than answered a lot of questions for me. With tomorrow being a stripe out, do you foresee us ever doing a blowout? Like blowing UCLA out? Possible. I think we could. I don't think they're a very good team. And I think this is a game where we get a couple turnovers and give Drew Aller and company a short field to then go down and score quickly. And that's when the game starts to get out of hand. Let's say Penn State scores a touchdown. 2 plays later, UCLA throws a pick. Then we score another touchdown. Like, that's how the routes start to come when you are not making turnovers on defense, which the defense kind of struggled to do up to this point. They did it when they needed to against Bowling Green, but no turnovers against Kent State. And then Illinois had 2 turnovers, obviously, against a team that took care of the football really well. But I do think it's a possibility of a blowout. Nick Dawkins is at Campus Stakes on Sunday. Come check him out. Campus Stakes, 10 to 11 a.m. He will be in here, have a signing, so be on the lookout for that. He is truly one of the best people I have ever been around. So come out, and if you are still in State College Sunday morning, come see Nick Dawkins here at Campus Stakes. I hope we see Ethan Grunkmeyer. I'm a huge Grunkmeyer fan. I think he can be really special. Yeah, we're all waiting to see Grunkmeyer. I don't know. I think this is a kind of one of those sneaky games where we could see a lot of young guys get in, just because I think by the time we get deep into the fourth quarter, I think we're handling UCLA pretty easily, especially I bet a lot of them, they know they're going to get whooped. They're coming off the plane. They're just landing right now. They're tired, and they're just going to want to get back to California. That's kind of how I see it, man. Blue out. I love the idea. I've been saying it for years. Have a white out and a blue out. I mean, I feel like the blue out doesn't have the same type of aura. I hear you guys. I hear you. I understand. I'm just curious how that would look because it's a lot darker, but teams did blackouts. I've seen that type of thing. I mean, obviously blackout doesn't really go for us. It's not our colors, although we could. You know, it'd be fun. We did like a pink. Nah, you don't want to do pink. Not enough people own pink, but if I'd be behind a blackout, I could get behind that. I like that. Make it like a C out there. All right, you guys are actually you're getting me on board. Well, maybe we'll take this to Coach Franklin, see what he has to say, because I would like to see some other stuff. But I mean, I feel like if you do a whiteout, you can't have a blackout too. It has to be kind of one thing. And I feel like the reason the whiteout is so cool is because it's one time a year. So you start to kind of take away from that when you do it multiple times a year. That was kind of the conversation with Illinois of, hey, if we're doing a whiteout, kind of makes it a little less special. And then also the TV deals, that type of thing. I mean, people want Penn State playing on like CBS. They want Penn State, ABC, whatever, Fox. They want Penn State when it's a whiteout because it's eyeballs. It is pretty much the greatest show in all of sports is the whiteout. So we will have that shortly here against Washington in November. So we are finishing up here at the Behind the Wall pregame show. We just went an hour straight, no commercials. I love you guys. I appreciate you guys coming out, asking questions. Follow me on Twitter for a lot of updates tomorrow. I will be live tweeting the game. So interact, hit me up. Final prediction, I'll go 38-7 Penn State. That's how I'm feeling. Appreciate you guys tuning into the Behind the Wall pregame show. I will see you Sunday morning.